Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Simon Marks, and in this bulletin, we'll get you a roundup on stories developing around the world. First up, the day's top headlines. In a relief for millions of people, the World Health Organization has given approval to Indian-made Covaxin for emergency use listing. The Indian Prime Minister had raised the issue of Covaxin's approval with the WHO chief at the G20 summit. China battles a fresh COVID-19 outbreak despite strict curbs. China's coronavirus cases spike to a nearly 3-month high ahead of a key Communist Party conclave. In the United States, Republican candidate Glenn Youngkin wins the keys to the governor's mansion in Virginia, pulling off a stunning upset in a race seen as an early verdict on President Joe Biden's first year in office. An ally of Tigrayan rebel forces claims that the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa could be overrun in months, if not weeks, even as the Prime Minister says that the rebels are set to destroy the country, not to build it. The Islamic State Khorasan group claims responsibility for the Kabul military hospital attack. Top Taliban commander Malvi Hamdullah Mukhlis was also killed in the bombing. Ukraine claims a build-up of Russian forces near its border. The country's defense ministry is claiming that more than 90,000 Russian troops are near the border and were not withdrawn after recent military exercises. And a 4-year-old Australian girl abducted from a campsite 18 days ago is rescued alive and well from a locked house. The child has been handed over to her family safely, and one man has been taken into custody. We begin today with a political earthquake here in the United States. Republican candidate Glenn Youngkin pulled off a shock win over the Democrats in the hotly contested race to become the next governor of the state of Virginia. The results are seen as a dire warning for the Democrats ahead of midterm elections next year, when 1/3 of the Senate and the entire House of Representatives will be up for grabs. A newcomer to politics, Youngkin defeated former Democrat Governor Terry McAuliffe, and he becomes the first Republican to win statewide office in Virginia in 12 years. Youngkin promised immediately to improve schools, lower taxes, and build what he calls a new day for Virginians.
A new day where all Virginians, all of us, can deserve to look forward to grabbing, to aspiring, to dreaming, and then achieving that great Virginia promise. God bless you all. Together, we will change the trajectory of this Commonwealth. And friends, we are going to start that transformation on day one.
Now, when that race in Virginia began, polls showed Terry McAuliffe, the former Democrat governor, would easily win. After all, Joe Biden took the state by 10 percentage points in the presidential election only 1 year ago. But in an emotionally charged campaign, Glenn Youngkin largely steered clear of the more controversial aspects of Donald Trump's presidency and capitalized instead on growing disappointment with the Biden administration, setting up a blueprint for the Republican camp ahead of the 2022 midterms. Just hours before the results came in, as he prepared to leave COP26 in Glasgow, President Biden rather rashly predicted a win for his party in a state where Democrats have not lost a single election since 2009.
Democrat Terry McAuliffe is struggling in a state that you won by 10 points. Do you see his problems as a rebuke of your presidency?
We're going to win. I think we're going to win in Virginia. And you know, you're reporting it being close. The race is very close. I don't believe, and I've not seen any evidence that whether or not I am doing well or poorly, whether or not I've got my agenda passed or not, is going to have any real impact on winning or losing.
Well, that prediction, of course, was wrong, and there was more bad news from New Jersey, where the gubernatorial election is currently too close to call. Republican Jack Ciattarelli and incumbent Democrat Phil Murphy are locked in an unexpected neck-and-neck battle. Votes are still being tallied in some of the Democratic Party's anticipated strongholds. Murphy still hopes to become the first Democratic governor to win re-election in New Jersey for 4 decades, but a recount now seems likely. The elections were the first major tests of voter sentiment since Joe Biden took office, and the results are a massive warning sign that voters in key battlegrounds have grave reservations about him. The Biden administration has been facing criticisms after the chaotic Afghanistan withdrawal and a stalled $3 million infrastructure agenda on Capitol Hill. The administration has also faced public resistance over its management of COVID-19. For more, let's cross, as we often do, to my WION correspondent Susan Tehrani, who joins us live today from New York. And Susan, Joe Biden was actually stepping off Air Force One at Andrews Air Force Base as Glenn Youngkin in Virginia was taking to the stage to declare victory. These results are a massive blow for the Biden presidency and the White House more broadly.
Absolutely, Simon. And first of all, it demonstrates how out of touch the Biden administration is with the sentiment of the country. Just this weekend, we had polls that demonstrated how Americans are dissatisfied with his performance on the one hand, but also just 10 months into his presidency to be able to flip Virginia by 10 to 12 percentage points, and now we see New Jersey, a deep blue states neck and neck with Republicans. And I think that what we see here is the American public really focusing on quality of life issues at this point, and being a little bit frustrated with the ideological outreach that the Democratic Party has been focusing on. And I think what we saw in Virginia, and perhaps what we're seeing, depending on what happens in New Jersey, it's still a sign that the Democrats will have to really focus on major issues at the end of the day, as opposed to these ideological factors that they've been focusing on, like critical race theory, wokeism, and whatnot. At the end of the day, in Virginia, it was a lot about schools. It was a lot about mask mandates. You're coming out of a COVID mandated year, and when parents take their kids to school, they're pumping gas into their cars. There's inflation. There's a supply chain issue. And I think really Youngkin, what he did was focus on these issues more, and I think Republicans will be focusing on these issues as well moving forward. And it's going to be an issue for the Democrats to be able to steer into the center a little more and try to gain momentum once again after these elections that we saw. Also, the lieutenant governorship in Virginia moved to a Republican side as well.
Absolutely. Susan, stay there. We're going to come back to you in just a moment, but there is one other election that we want to tell everyone about, and that is the news that Eric Adams will become just the second African American to lead America's biggest city. As expected, the former police captain cruised to victory in the race to become mayor of New York City, as voters picked a leader from candidates who were largely defined by their stances on police and crime. The Democratic candidate defeated Republican candidate Curtis Sliwa to become New York City's 110th mayor. Adams emerged victorious with promises to boost public safety and provide a voice to working-class residents. Drawing on his own experience as a police captain and as a black man who experienced police brutality as a youth, his message on crime and his experience as a police officer largely insulated him from attacks launched by his Republican opponent. And if that opponent's name, Curtis Sliwa, is familiar, it's because he was the founder of the Guardian Angels anti-crime patrol group, which made massive headlines all over the world back in the 1980s. Adams, who is 61, takes over in January from Democrat Bill de Blasio, who was term limited after 8 years in office.
So, brothers and sisters, and the people of our city, they have spoken. And tonight, New York has chosen one of you, one of our own. I am you. I am you. After years of praying and hoping and struggling and working, we are headed to City Hall. All of you have that power to fuel us. We are so divided right now, and we're missing the beauty of our diversity. We have to end all of this division of who we are, where we go to worship, what do we wear. No, today we take off the intramural jersey and we put on one jersey, Team New York.
The new mayor will face the task of overseeing the largest American city's nascent recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as confronting wealth inequality, the lack of affordable housing, and struggling public schools. He had been expected to win handily the overwhelmingly Democratic city.
This campaign was about this city and the people in it, from every corner and every background in the city. Those who have been left behind and believe they will never catch up. This campaign was for the underserved, the marginalized, the abandoned. This campaign was for those who have been betrayed by their government. There's a covenant between government and the people of our city. You pay your taxes, we deliver your tax dollars through goods and services. We have failed to provide those goods and services. January 1st, that stops. That stops.
So let's go back to Susan Tehrani, who is right there in New York City. And Susan, I mean, there was never any doubt about the outcome of this race, but Democrats, I think, will take some solace from the fact that they are still performing very strongly in a progressive stronghold like New York. And certainly this victory of Eric Adams is going to boost the left wing of the Democratic Party, isn't it?
To an extent, and Eric Adams, again, was smart and wise in running his campaign on an optimistic note. As we saw in those sound bites, he talked about unity, bringing the city together, and he was very wise in, again, running this campaign on a left-centrist message, as opposed to someone like the current mayor, Bill de Blasio, who really had this sort of progressive messaging constantly throughout his administration. administration, and right now is frankly disliked by almost everyone in New York, dare I say, and people are waiting for him to really end his term and leave, with the mandates and with the high crime. So Eric Adams will have his hands full, but also, being a former NYPD police officer, he's going to have a good relationship with the largest force of the police force in the country, which is very important at a time when New York is facing high crime rates. But he's also an African American, which is very important for the large African American community here. But it's also important to note that he really didn't focus on race. Again, that ideological overreach that the Progressive Front of the Democratic Party has been focusing on, that has not been to their favor, as we see right now. The quality of life issue is really something Americans have been focusing on. I just want to mention, we did see also in Minneapolis that voters rejected the defund the police movement, for example. That was another vote that we saw, a highly progressive state, but again, they want the quality of life aspect of the issue being front and center, despite the fact that they want reform. They don't want their police departments to be defunded. So the sentiment of the country really, moving towards that direction, and I think the Democrats will take note.
Yeah, it was notable that last week there was a poll in New Hampshire of likely voters, another vital battleground state, showing 68% of voters think the United States is on the wrong track. Susan Tehrani, live for us in a chilly New York City. Thanks very much indeed for that. We will talk to Susan again soon. The United States has approved the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine for children. It's a major milestone in the country's fight against the pandemic. Children aged 5 to 11, there's about 28 million of them in America, could start receiving their vaccinations within the next few days. The US is already inoculating children between 12 and 18. The authorization comes after an expert panel at the CDC weighed the risks and benefits. FDA officials say the vaccine is 91% effective. While the decision is being hailed, the dosage is a bit tricky for drug suppliers and doctors because the vaccine dose authorized for children is 1/3 of the dosage given to adults. So smaller needles will have to be used, and the second jab will be given 3 weeks after the first. Nevertheless, the rollout comes at a critical time. The US has recorded the world's highest COVID-related death toll. In the last 2 years, about 750,000 people in the US have lost their lives to the virus. Meanwhile, vaccination records show that nearly 80% of adults have received at least one jab in the US, but still only 57% of all those eligible have so far been fully vaccinated. The country is also beginning to push a campaign for booster shots. Despite some parts of the country still experiencing outbreaks, the US has seen a steady decline in nationwide cases, hospitalizations and deaths over the last month. But vaccine hesitancy and indeed even outright refusal is in some communities marring the country's ability to chart a path back to normalcy. Many parents are still reluctant to get their children vaccinated, and this might become a hurdle in the president's efforts to boost the national vaccination drive. There was stunning news over the last few hours from Silicon Valley. After intense pressure, tech giant Facebook, now of course called Meta, has decided to scrap its facial recognition system. The company says that the technology is very beneficial, but its misuse outweighs the pros.
Facebook announced on Tuesday it is shutting down its facial recognition system, which automatically identifies users in photos and videos. The company cited growing societal concerns about the use of such technology. In a blog post, Facebook's vice president of artificial intelligence wrote that while the technology had many beneficial uses, quote, its long-term role in society needs to be debated in the open. The removal of facial recognition by the world's largest social media platform comes as the tech industry has faced a reckoning over the past few years over the ethics of using the technology. Critics say facial recognition, which is popular among retailers, hospitals, and other businesses for security purposes, could compromise privacy, target marginalized groups, and normalize intrusive surveillance. The news also comes as Facebook has been under intense scrutiny by regulators and lawmakers over user safety and a wide range of abuses on its platform. The company, which last week renamed itself Meta, said more than 1/3 of Facebook's daily active users have opted into the face recognition setting on the social media site, and the change will now delete the facial recognition templates of more than 1 billion people. A Facebook spokesperson said the removal will roll out globally and is expected to be complete by December.
And that's all we have for you on today's WION Live broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Simon Marks. Happy Diwali to all those of you celebrating. For more global news and updates, stay tuned to WION. World is One.
This is right, Arab.